Alright, so we're going to bust loose the lug nuts and change these wheels out from the factory wheels. This one here is pretty rough, but they weren't very pretty to begin with. We just had these on, so the car went to the paint shop. Didn't get our nice rims damaged. So the standard lug nuts on XK8 should be a 22mm lug nut. So we're going to snap that on a large extension, so we've got plenty of leverage. We've still got the car on the ground, even though the lift does have a little bit of tension taken off of the suspension, but we want to do that to help hold the tire in place as we go to break these loose. So coming loose, doesn't really matter which one you start with or which one you end with. You just want to get them loose, so that all you got to do once you lift it up is back them the rest of the way off. So we're just simply going to take them loose so that we might remove the wheel. So these here look really easy, partly because we didn't torque them down real tight. But standard torque is around 100 foot-pound, 110 foot-pound, I believe. Double check on that. But they are pretty tight. I prefer to torque them once I get the wheels back on by hand, not with a torque stick on a impact, just because I don't want to take the chance of messing up a lug nut or a stud and wind up having to drill it off. So when you do that, you take a high risk of damaging your wheels. And the wheels that we'll be putting on here do have a rather deep port for the lug nuts, very similar to what these are. So if you have to drill it out, you are taking a very high risk of having to possibly damage your rim in the process of getting it off. So like I said, good thing to do by hand with a proper torque wrench. Okay, we're going to take our wheel studs off, or sorry, wheel lugs off. Jaguar used kind of a crummy design, in my opinion. So what they did is the washer. I do like what they did there. But as per the actual lug nut itself, it has this tin cap over the lug nut itself. Chevy's used them, many other manufacturers have used them, and they all do the same thing. After they get a little wear and tear on them, they're a little loose. They either come off, or worst case scenario, they wind up getting all chewed up because of people using the wrong size sockets and stuff on them, and they make it really hard to get the lug nut back off without having to first tear this off some way if it gets too bad. But like I said, these are a 22mm, so we're going to commence getting the rest of these off. As the wheel gets loose, you may have to give it a little wiggle to get the lug nut off. The socket tends to kind of catch on the interior walls of the wheel. And of course, the last one, you want to steady that wheel, because you see it's getting really loose. There's a little bit of a lip on the hub that'll help hold that in place. So if you keep a little tension on it while you take your last lug nut off, you don't have to worry about the wheel falling off. And you don't have to support it with your strength. You just let the wheel hold in place on that ledge that's on the wheel. Going to get ourselves underneath the wheel. Going to give it a little jiggle and a lift. There you go. And here's that ledge or lip that's on the wheel hub that I was talking about, that actually holds the wheel in place. So like I said, if you keep tension against the wheel, against the main hub, this lip will hold the weight of the wheel for you, so you don't have to support it until you're ready to actually take it off. So when you're lining up, I kind of use the car, wedge it against my, or the wheel, and wedge it against my waist, and then line up just like that on the stud. Once again, keep pressure so that it holds against the hub, so I don't have to use my strength to hold it. I did go with aftermarket wheels, as you can tell. So I have 19mm lug nuts with my aftermarket wheels. I'm going to start us a lug nut preferably at the top. That way the weight will want to transfer away from the car. You can just push down to hold it against as you line up a lower lug nut. Now these actually have a painted surface here, and unfortunately when I took these off last time for the paint, I didn't get the socket on real good and it kicked over on me and actually chipped my paint. So be very careful, otherwise you're going to be like me and have to pay for some sort of repair on your wheel. I like to get these set in pretty tight by hand before I ever lower the car down to torque them down with a torque wrench. Now I am also using a locking lug. So when you use a locking lug, do not lose your key, is always the important thing. And on a more important note is make sure you record what key you have in the manufacturer. Because if you do lose your key and you do know those two points of information, you can contact the manufacturer and they will sell you a new key. If not, you're going to have a hard time getting those off. You're probably going to have to drill them out. And like I spoke of before, how deep my lug nuts are on these wheels, that's going to be real fun getting that out and not tear up the wheel. Tightening down these lug nuts, just hand tight before I lower the car. You notice I'm going in a star pattern. Here, 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 here. Just as if you were going to draw one with a pencil. Same pattern. Of course I do have my locking lug, so I have to get that in place and get it cinched down by hand. Like I said, be careful, especially with the locking lugs, because they tend to wiggle a little bit, so you don't damage your wheels. With these being so deep, as you notice, I use a magnet to help get that out. So now we've got that cinched down, we'll have to lower the car down and tighten them down with the actual torque wrench. I've got this one set to 100 foot-pound. So when I've got some tension on the tire, keep it from spinning, then I can actually get the torque on there. Now a quick note, if you run tires like I'm running, I've opted to go pretty much as big as you can go on these without any modification. It's 255s in the front, and these are rotational, so they do have a marker on them to let you know which way they need to move. Now that's always marked as forward movement, not reverse movement. So if the arrow points this way, it means you are set up for forward rotation. So it should be pointing towards the front of the car when you see that. So here's the front, just to show you. We've got a 255 on the front, 40 your sidewall, 19 the diameter of the rim. So the standard wheels that come on these is a 245 45 R17. So substantially wider tire on the front and rear, as well as a larger rim. So you're going to have less sidewall. One of the benefits of less sidewall is less tire roll when you're going hard into a corner, but it also trades off as a harder ride. So look at the old cars that had the really big fat sidewalls on the tires. That constituted part of the smoothness of the ride, because the tire would take some of that impact before the suspension was even involved. So as I mentioned on the fronts, I'm running a 255 on the front. So on the rear I'm running a 285, and that's pretty much as wide as you can go on your rear tires as well. Running a 19-inch rim, so that gives me a 285 35. 35 is your sidewall. 19, of course, is the size of your rim, actually the diameter of your rim. And then 285 is the span of the tire. So wider tire, better grip. So we're going to tighten up the lug nuts now that we have tension on the tire and the wheel. Keep it from turning wide. Torque it down. So like I said, 100 foot-pound. Turn until you hear that click. then we're going to go across in the star pattern. Turn until you get the click. Cross, still in our star pattern. And last but not least, our locking lug. This one here, like I said, it tends to wobble, so I got to be careful. Keep tension against it to keep it from wobbling. And there we go. All 5 lug nuts are torqued down to 100 foot-pound to keep our wheel on nice and tight while we drive.